Alright guys, I've been running the YHM Resonator K pretty hard for a couple of months now on several different platforms, so I think it's time for a proper review. This review is going to focus on the ownership experience of this can, basically what it's like to live with the YHM ecosystem, all the different mounts and platforms that I've tried with it. If you actually want the data-driven review, the decibel rating at the muzzle, at the ear from different platforms, you're going to have to look elsewhere. That sort of stuff requires very specialized equipment, which I don't have. All I can really tell you is that subjectively, this can is pretty loud. And that's where we're going to start. This is a K can, so it's fairly short, light, and compact, but the trade-off is there are less baffles, so it doesn't have as good of sound reduction performance. YHM cans, I think, are also a little bit long in the tooth. There's been a lot of suppressor development in the industry recently, and these are sort of an old-school design. I've used the suppressor on several different guns with a bunch of different mounting interfaces, including this 300 Blackout with an 8-inch barrel, shooting supersonic and subsonic ammunition. I've used it on my SIG Tred 716, which is a 308. I have also used it on a couple of different barrel lengths of a 5.56 rifle. And even though the suppressor definitely makes all those platforms more pleasant, it doesn't really make any of them quiet, not even the 300 Blackout subsonics. I keep almost wishing I'd gone with the full-size YHM Resonator R2 instead of the K. The R2 is longer and it's heavier, but it has room for more baffles. I think it has 2 additional baffles versus the K, which should make it significantly quieter, because I believe this can only has 3 baffles. That's quite a significant difference, but so is the weight and length. If you look at the YHM Turbo K and the Turbo T2, the T2 really isn't that much heavier or longer than the Turbo K. So in that case, I think the better buy is probably the T2. But the difference between the Resonator K and the Resonator R2 is very significant. The K can weighs in at a little bit under 10 ounces. The R2 weighs an entire pound, 16 ounces, if you're from a country that doesn't use pounds. Sorry about that. Same story with the length. The K can is 5.5 inches long. The R2 is almost an entire 8 inches long. So would that weight and length be a good trade-off for increased sound suppression performance? I think so, at least on paper. It could be that if I had the R2, I would be miserable with how long and nose-heavy my guns were, instead of just wishing that they were a little bit quieter. I've also used the Resonator K on a bunch of different mount interfaces, sticking mostly with the YHM ecosystem. The mount that it comes with is called the Phantom QD system, which quick attaches to all of the YHM muzzle brakes and flash hiders. YHM has a shortened system called the Phantom Kurs QD, which shaves a little bit of weight and length off, and that's mostly what I've been using for a couple of reasons. One, I'd like to reduce the length and the weight of the suppressor, but two, the Kurs QD system has much better lockup with all of my muzzle devices than the included Phantom QD. Not sure why that is, something to do with tolerance or specs or something like that, but when I use the original Phantom QD that came on the can, the suppressor is very loose no matter what I do. With the Kurs system, the suppressor locks up much tighter. It will still wiggle slightly back and forth once the can gets super hot, but that's not the end of the world to me, and I think most suppressors with a quick attach system do have a little bit of wiggle. It's just that for my money, out of the box with the full-size Phantom QD, the suppressor seemed to wiggle way too much. It was way too difficult to get it to lock in properly. I also have 2 different direct thread adapters. One is the YHM 5/8x24 direct thread adapter, which is currently installed on the can in the image you see before you. The other one is made by Hanson Brothers Machining and has a taper mount, which is the one that I needed to use in order to mount the suppressor on my SIG Tred 716. SIG barrels have a taper at the base of the threads because SIG muzzle devices and suppressors have that taper. There are, I think, a lot of very good reasons to use that taper, just mechanically speaking. However, practically speaking, it does create a bit of a problem. If I thread the YHM direct thread adapter onto that SIG, then the 90-degree shoulder of the YHM direct thread adapter doesn't mate properly with the tapered shoulder of the SIG barrel, and the suppressor doesn't really stay on very well. So I have the direct thread adapter from Hanson Brothers Machining, which is fantastic. It's still 5/8x24, but it has that tapered shoulder to provide perfect friction lockup on that SIG barrel. So when using the Resonator K with the Hanson Brother adapter on the SIG Tred 716, no issues, the thing stayed on just fine, and it was perfectly functional. That rifle is a very good suppressor host. It's got a 16-inch barrel with rifle-length gas, which is kind of unorthodox. Also comes with an H2 buffer from the factory, but because this suppressor is very small, it was not quiet. It was certainly more pleasant than using a muzzle brake or just the factory flash hider, but I really would have preferred having a little bit more suppression. That would make the gun longer and more unwieldy, because we are talking about basically an additional half pound over the Resonator K, and it still wouldn't have been hearing safe, but perhaps it would have been a little bit more pleasant. I also used the Resonator K with the Kurz QD system on the mini flash hider on my 300 Blackout for quite a number of rounds, shooting both supersonic and subsonic. With an 8-inch barrel and a Kurz can and subsonic ammunition, the platform is still honestly pretty damn loud. I don't think it quite approaches the realm of hearing safe, at least if you are going to shoot a large volume of fire. It's definitely way more pleasant if you're only shooting a handful of rounds compared to supersonic, but you can still feel a little bit of that discomfort, and the discomfort is a good sign that your ears are dying. So once again, I think I would prefer the longer, heavier can on the 8-inch barrel. Maybe if I had a 10.5-inch 300 Blackout barrel, it would be a little bit more of a toss-up. Not totally sure. More recently, I've been using the Resonator K with the YHM direct thread mount on a CMMG Descent in 300 Blackout. The Descent has a shorter 6.5-inch barrel compared to the 8-inch barrel on my own personal 300 Blackout build, so basically all the stuff from my gun applies, but a little bit more so. Decibel reduction is still only part of the equation when it comes to suppressors. The other one is overall signature reduction. This version of the YHM Resonator K is the new one that has the little, 3 cloverleaf cuts in the end to supposedly cut down on flash. It does seem to work. I've seen older models of the Resonator and Turbo that didn't have those cuts. Seemed like a pretty flashy can. These new cuts do seem to improve things a little bit. One issue that I've run into when using the direct thread adapter is that the can wants to unthread from the adapter itself. I know a lot of people are wary of direct thread because they're worried the can will walk off the end of the barrel. As long as I've followed a certain procedure when attaching the suppressor, I haven't had that problem. What I usually do is attach the suppressor hand tight, heat it up a little bit with a couple rounds, crank it down with a wrench, and then it'll be pretty much solidly on there. But when I was using this can on the CMMG Descent, after a couple magazines, the suppressor would heat up enough that it would start to come loose from the direct thread adapter itself. The direct thread adapter still solidly locked onto the barrel, no way to remove it without a wrench, but the suppressor would just sort of twist off by hand from the direct thread mount. And the way that I initially attached this was by getting the gun nice and hot, cranking the mount down with a wrench, and then cranking the suppressor to the mount with its own little included suppressor wrench. And I cannot for the life of me get it tight enough to stay, and I'm unwilling to put some other kind of material on the threads because I still need to be able to periodically detach this and put it on different mounts. That is a problem kind of unique to the way that I'm trying to use this can. If you were to set this can up with either the QD adapter or with a direct thread adapter, then you would probably want to use some Rockset on the threads. I think that's also what YHM recommends. So if you have multiple hosts that just use the QD or multiple hosts that just use direct thread, then you're good to go. My problem is that I'm trying to cycle this thing between multiple platforms using the QD and 2 different direct thread adapters, so I don't want to Rockset it on there too hard. The solution for me is probably giving up on suppressing the SIG 716 and just using this thing with the Kurz QD. Then I'll just grab another muzzle device and toss that onto whatever other gun I need to use instead of trying to go for the 5/8x24 direct thread. The threads at the back of the suppressor are the industry standard, so I could swap this to a whole bunch of different other mount interfaces like the Reardon Atlas or Xeno or Chemo or any of that stuff. None of that would really work any better for me than what I already have going on right now. I'd just be spending a whole bunch of money on new muzzle devices, so I'm not going to bother doing that. I like the YHM Mini QD flash hiders. I have one in 1/2x28. I have one in 5/8x24 for the 30 cal guns. I have another YHM can on the way. I ordered an R9 because I can use that one as either a direct thread 1/2x28 or a tri-lug, depending on what kind of 9mm shenanigans I've got going on in my future. In the relatively short time that I've had this can, I've put a lot of rounds through it, 3 different calibers, and I guess that's kind of the benefit of a 30 cal can. You can really exercise it on a lot of different guns. The main question really is, would I rather have the R2 instead of the K? And I think the answer is no for all practical intents and purposes. The Resonator K serves to reduce signature and make shooting the gun more pleasant. It's been doing that just fine for 5.56, 300 Blackout, and 308. The Resonator R2 wouldn't make any of those platforms hearing safe except for probably 300 Blackout subsonic, but it would also be adding a lot of weight and bulk to the end of all of these guns. Most of the time that I shoot, I'm at a range where other people are also shooting, so it's not like I'm going without hearing protection anyway. So a 30 cal K-can is an extremely versatile suppressor choice. I don't know if it should be your first choice. I know a lot of guys will say, hey, your first suppressor should be something very versatile, like a 30 cal can, and then you can get a dedicated can after that. I think that's probably the wrong way to go about it. You should probably get a really good dedicated can for your primary rifle, and then worry about getting some fun toys to swap around for your other guns down the road. My first Form 4 suppressor was a Gemtech Trek, which is a really unorthodox choice. I've already explained the flawed reasoning behind that can in another video. Anyway, YHM Resonator K gets the thumbs up. The versatility of the mount interface means you can configure this in a bunch of different ways, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should be swapping the rear end of this device all the time. I think it basically works best if you pick one of these mount interfaces to be your baby, and that can be 5/8x24 direct thread, or it can be Curse QD, and whatever you choose, you then adapt all of your guns to use this can, rather than repeatedly reconfiguring this can to work on different guns. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. You can find a link in the video description to Subscribestar if you'd like to support this channel directly, but you always, of course, have the option to like the video and comment on the video and send it to your friends who are asking you questions about the YHM Resonator K, as I understand friends are wont to do. See you guys next time.